As we start, it's important to realize that we're in a unique time right now. We had COVID-19 landed in North America, at least, and in parts of Europe in early March. And within a week, everything changed. And depending on where you're living, there's different rules. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people are living in areas, for instance, people in Tulsa this weekend, where there's a lot of people doing something that's risky. And those people would also be using washrooms and restaurants and takeout places and grocery stores. So there's a lot of variation in how this works. Some people lost their jobs, some people didn't. But we've all had some version of shelter in place. And then we had the Black Lives Matter protests that came up about 3 weeks ago. And a lot of people have been out protesting in different ways and educating ourselves on that. And that created another level of intensity in the nervous system. So now here we are, depending on where you are in the world, your economies are starting to open back up, which everyone is recognizing will create more virus spread. And here we are in our situations that we're in. If we feel threatened, we go into one of the survival systems: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And what that does is it gets us out of our present moment, but we're not able to stay and metabolize the discomfort. Last week, we talked about clean pain and dirty pain that Resmaa Menakem talks about. And so if we're able to stay present, we're able to metabolize it. We can see what's going on. We can support ourselves in healthy ways. And if we're not able to stay present, then the pain gets suppressed. It gets kind of stuck in our bodies and we keep dealing with it. So I think this would be fair to say for everybody, really, is that our nervous systems are struggling to stay regulated. We do all these wonderful things to get regulated. A lot of people are walking more. We're outside doing relaxation exercises, and people are having regular Zoom calls with family and different things or with friends. And the reality is that our bodies are still really tight and we're not sleeping well. Our food often is not as healthy as it usually is. Many people are doing a lot more positive things. There's such a high level of stress that's coming up in the nervous system that it's not entirely compensating for it. So these familiar things are driven by the primitive brain. That feeling we need to be included in the tribe, in the group, in the family group, the community group, the group of friends, whether that's in person or online. And if we have those well developed pathways to ice cream or shopping or whatever it might be, then it's going to be a little bit easier for us to slip back in there. And so one of the really important things is to just notice it's human nature to want to comfort ourselves, and it's human nature to want to be safe. And so we're going to do all of these things to try and help ourselves feel better. And one of the things we do is we justify, or we have in AA, they call it stinkin' thinkin', where we justify drinking or we justify whatever we might do by just kind of minimizing it and saying, well, what's the harm? You know, it's just a couple of glasses of wine after a long day, or I deserve a break from the stress in my life and I'm just going to zone out with Netflix and ice cream for the weekend. And when we need a break from the fear and distress, the most comforting thing is the familiar, things that we've done before. So foods that have that trifecta of sugar, salt, and fat trigger feel-good hormones in our brain. A joint or a drink or something like that, we relax and we feel less anxious. One of the things that's happening here with social distancing is that it's turning into isolation, and a lot of people were isolated to start with. And what I've been noticing is I've been having the odd experience now of seeing my son and grandchildren is that it feels really compelling to have that connection. It's kind of like that voice that says, okay, but you need to stay 6 feet distance and you need to be following these practices, you know, the social distancing practices. kind of gets overridden by that compulsion we have to be present with people. It's interesting that that's how it works. So we develop these superhighways in our brain. Problem isn't so much that we're reaching for comfort, it's just that we're not doing it short term. We might be really reinforcing those over and over. And so the issue can be that we have a superhighway in our brain, and we've developed that over years of use, and it doesn't take very much to hook us again. So for me, I started eating ice cream when I was 12, and I had a spoon in my room, and the freezer with the ice cream was just outside my door in the basement bedroom. And that became a really important way that I survived those years. I don't think I would have survived them if I hadn't had that for comfort. And so I have very, very strong associations with that emotionally. But I also have a highway in my brain that goes right to, I'm stressed. This is what I want to do. And so now, with the degree of regulation that I have and the degree of the years when I haven't done that, so I have a lot of those experiences too. And I know through personal experience that I don't need to do that in order to be safe anymore. But still, that's the pull that's there. And so if I start doing something like that, it just takes me right into it. And then I have to kind of struggle to pull back out. I think that's similar for all of us. So we talked about shaming. We talk about shaming a lot because it's really a fundamental part of our healing is that we learn somehow to stop shaming ourselves. And shaming ourselves is different from saying, wow, look what I'm doing to my body. I'm noticing that I'm not getting out anymore to walk. I notice that I'm eating these things. I notice that one glass of wine has turned into two or three several times a week instead of once a week, or whatever it is that we're being compulsive about. Checking Facebook is another one. So when we're doing that, we could look at that from the lens of trauma education. Like all these slides that we were just looking at, that's how our nervous system works. And so why do we feel like we're the one that has to break that pattern? Like we're the only one who can just skip over evolution and not need to comfort ourselves, not be vulnerable to that. And that's really not how it works. And we know that on some level. But then how do we actually work with that? Stopping shaming ourselves can be that we stop and be kind. So we notice when we go into some kind of collapse, we notice when those inner critic thinking starts. Then we go, wow, okay, right now I'm feeling like I'm shaming myself. What can I do to bring myself out of that and to stop and be kind and find a way to acknowledge how serious this is. It's very serious when something like that happens. And we need to find ways to stop doing that to ourselves. So one of the ways that this works is this all or nothing thinking. And, we might have 1 or 2 hours in a week when we do something that's not as healthy, but we forget about all the other hours when we were doing healthy things. And so to be more realistic and have a better perspective can help us with the shaming as well. And on the other hand, we want to not be going into denial. So for us to say, okay, this is what I'm noticing. I'm concerned about this partly because I've been there before and I know how serious that can get. And partly because maybe I don't want to have those negative health effects. I don't want to gain weight. I don't want to have inflammation in my body, whatever it might be. And how can we be clear and honest about how we're coping and the impact of that without going into the shame? Another important thing that I don't think is often talked about so much with addiction and recovery is that when we have trauma, we need to stay in that window of tolerance. And the last few years, people have been starting to talk about harm reduction as a legitimate way to work with addiction. Adi Jaffe is one of the people I interviewed for the Radical Recovery Summit this year, and he was talking about a woman he'd worked with that went from 2 glasses of wine every night of the week to 1 or 2 on Saturday nights. And he says, that's success. We need to allow ourselves to stay within our window of tolerance And so outside the window of tolerance, we're emotionally flooded. Our primitive brain kind of takes over. Our cognitive brain goes offline. And when we have something big that happens, we can feel that, and we just feel like we're not very grounded. We're triggered. We feel vulnerable to things. So to stay within our window of tolerance might mean that we have to keep using some of these strategies in a minimal kind of a way so that we're not overwhelmed, in conjunction with a lot of other things that we do. So it might be to avoid certain people. It might be to increase the healthy eating. There's lots of ways that we can work with that. One thing that I find helps is to, and this is where the mindfulness comes in, is to really have a look at what we need right now. So if you put on a favorite song and you dance to it, we could hug ourselves, bring our hands to our arms and give ourselves a hug. We could do shaking. We could talk with a friend, watch a good movie. There's all kinds of things that we could do when we're emotionally flooded that will help us to be steadier. And they don't all involve food or things that are harmful. And to not give up on ourselves. So just to close your eyes for a minute as I read these 2 sentences and feel into this for yourself. You are capable of making it through this, using your own resilience, your strength. We've all made it through to this day, to this moment. And we're capable of making it through this too. Even though it's so hard right now with COVID-19, that we can practice being on our own side. So if we find that we're turning against ourselves, we could practice being on our own side. And what would that feel like? The kindness, the compassion. Let yourself feel into that for a moment. What does that feel like in your body when you say to yourself, I'm not going to give up. I know I can make it through this. Not everything I'm doing is ideal, but I also know that it's okay. So I wanted to work with the reverse inquiry. Bring to mind something that you're doing that isn't ideal for you and put it into a I don't need. So I don't need to drink. I don't need to smoke pot to calm myself. I don't need to eat sweet, fatty, salty food to make it through the evening, and bring up an image of what your favorites are, what your rituals are. I'm confident and sure that I will be okay without whatever it is. So, whichever one of those resonates with you, let's take 3 or 4 minutes to really go into that and see what comes up. These reverse inquiries are intended to bring forward our resistance, our unconscious beliefs. I don't need to. Stay really present in your body and notice what comes up. Stay connected with your breath. You might have a number of things that are coming up. You could put them like a collage. Have a look at them. What's the argument? Maybe it's a clench in your gut. Oh, that's not true. And you might even notice if you say something like the last sentence in particular, I am confident and sure that I will be okay without whatever that is, the addictive substance. Notice that that might feel partly true. Sometimes when we do this, we see that there's some belief about that and we want to know what the unconscious beliefs are. But then in another sense, we know that that's actually true. We know that we're going to be okay without it. So that might be here too. It's okay. And then let's look at the utility. Everything we do has a reason. And often those reasons relate to approval, control, and safety. So if you look at the utility or the usefulness of whatever the behavior is you're working with, what is the utility of it now? So right now, for most of us, it's that we get a bit of a break from the stress, from the fear, the discomfort, not knowing what's going to happen next. And if this is a behavior that you had when you were younger, let's take a couple of minutes to look and see what was the utility of that when I was younger. I mentioned that I don't know if I would have been alive without ice cream when I was a teenager. It really, really helped me to downregulate. And that ability to take a break from the pain that I was experiencing was really important. What was that for you when you were younger? And notice your relationship with that younger self. Do you have kindness, compassion for them, patience, understanding? We had a lot less ability to do other things to comfort ourselves when we were younger. We had a brain that wasn't fully developed. We most likely didn't have the same kind of financial resources or the ability to leave home and live on our own if we were still young. So notice if you could really feel that connection and kindness for that younger self. And how could you best support yourself now? What do you really need in this moment? And in the previous inquiry, if you notice that there is a feeling that you'd be okay without that, would that be possible to feel into that before reaching for whatever it is? What do I actually need right now? How can I really support myself? And then let's work into just a few minutes working with kindness and compassion. And if you wanted to just let these words trickle in, sit with them. I allow myself comfort and kindness. And this could be a bit of a reverse inquiry, too. There might be something in there that's like, no, you don't deserve that. But see if you could just allow that in. I allow myself comfort and kindness. Notice your body and breath. I don't have to be perfect to love myself. I could love myself right now, even as I'm not perfect. I can be on my own side. And let's take a couple minutes to go back to the inquiry. I don't need to drink or whatever it is that you're working with. I don't need that to calm myself. I don't need it to make it through the evening. And I'm confident and sure that I will be okay without it. And as you repeat that back to yourself now, notice your experience. And whatever resistance is here, let it be seen. And you could reassure yourself, well, that is a thought in my mind, but actually, I don't think it's really all that true anymore. And bring in that utility that we were looking at before. What was the usefulness of it in the past? What's the usefulness now? And there certainly is usefulness now. And is this something that you really need? What do you really need in the moment? And one thing that might come up too is kind of an oppositional defiance. Okay, I don't need it, but I'm going to have it anyway. I want it. So notice if anything like that is there. Why shouldn't I have it? I deserve it. It's not so bad. I don't do it as much as I used to. It's not that harmful. Notice if there's any justifying or minimizing or that kind of thinking going on, or that defiance. I want it and I'm going to have it. Keep coming back to kindness. And what do you really need? And is there any element of shaming in this? Or would it be okay to let that shaming completely go? I don't have to be perfect to love myself. I allow myself comfort and kindness, and I'm on my own side. Feel that through your whole system, through your body, your emotions, your thoughts. Put your hand on your heart if you wanted. I'm here for myself unconditionally. And then when you're ready, open your eyes.